Welcome back to the Wine Tech Insiders podcast. Today we're going to talk about war and wine in the Ukraine, and we took a look at a video was released of a demo of Cana, which is the machine that can produce whatever beverages you would like. At least that's the promise. This is episode 26 of the Wine Tech Insiders podcast. I'd like to welcome back all of our insiders. We have Seb from Troly. Seb?
Good to be here.
Laurie from Oushinery.
Hi there.
Nick from Wine Owners.
Hello.
And Jonathan from Bottlebooks.
Hello, everyone.
So there is a war in Ukraine. It started about a week ago, and it is a disaster for everybody. I think we can probably safely say that.
So many levels.
Famously, Ukraine lost a bit of winemaking when they lost Crimea to Russia.
Yeah.
They do take a stand at ProWein, and they are wanting to try to go there to not, to keep promoting the products. ProWein, of course, has been under lockdown and hasn't had an event in 2 years. Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board is banning Russian products, and companies are pulling out of Russia.
It's not just Pennsylvania, like a lot, I think, across Canada as well. Seb, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of Russian product, I think, got pulled out as well from the LCBO and everything. So Ontario, I haven't checked the BC liquor store here in Vancouver, but like it was mostly, like the world of spirits. When we think of alcohol, Russian alcohol, the reality is we don't drink a lot of the champagne. Saying that with quotation mark, as we know, especially coming from France, myself. But it's just like, I think overall it's like it's not a game, but it's just very much like canceling Putin, and to cancel Putin, you have to cancel Russia, and it's just kind of like all together. I haven't had a chance to drink Ukrainian wine myself. One thing that I've been fascinated by, and I didn't realize that much, is how much of a agricultural powerhouse Ukraine is. Like, obviously, when it comes to like wheat and sunflower and like grapes and everything, and it's just like the repercussion for their own country, but how much they were like feeding and providing to other countries, especially in like Northern Africa. It's a long, hard time for Ukrainian and beyond.
It's really the breadbasket of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And Ireland, I think they've issued warnings to the farmers that they should be considering to plant grasses this year, because of, I think they source a lot from the Ukraine, so it's going to have some wide ramifications. And this is probably just some of my ignorance, but I didn't realize this until reading some of the articles, how much of a winemaking region, how much winemaking was done in Crimea, and that they had already lost as part of that war. And then
wish we could do more. You feel so far away that way. But I think you did, I mean, in your own measure, like you did something, right? A fundraising or something. Like, what did you do to help Ukraine?
One of our retailers, one of our retailer clients, IG Wines, are doing a fundraiser. So they have connections with Moldova, and I guess there's a lot of Ukrainians coming over the Moldova border as refugees, and they're doing a wine auction, basically. So along with a whole bunch of other people, I suspect I've stuck in some of my own wines as a way of trying to help out, right? And that's all you can do. That's what you can do, really. Is to try and provide cash for people who have been dislocated from their lives, and the rest, unfortunately, is not for us to sort out.
It's funny, like when you mentioned cash, I'm not sure if you guys have been following, and it's linking to like more like the tech subject, but how all of a sudden Airbnb is becoming a payment method to get cash into Ukrainians' hands. Really, really fascinating. I was listening to another podcast yesterday, even thinking, like, could it be almost like an expansion? We have Airbnb, like a sort of method payment, would they almost issue their own, credit card or something like that? To just how, take its creativity that way. So we're just curious, like, it's tech related, it's not wine, but like it's fascinating how the world has been embracing Airbnb.
Yeah, okay. Like I booked 2 weeks of an Airbnb, and yeah, okay, good. There's some money going there, but they don't even have food to buy with that money.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of obviously canceling of Russia on the B2B level. But what also kind of caught me off guard was talking to a few businesses recently that use freelancers from Russia. And so it's not really exactly B2B, but it's actually, having some discussions and probably some direct actions that they will stop working with the freelancers from there. So it's not just sort of, because I think a lot of the companies that have paused actions or paused business in Russia are still looking for ways to pay their staff.
But yeah, look, I'm curious because I was talking to a few wineries around how their supply chains are being affected. We work with smaller wineries, so very few of them are exporting in the north of Europe. And the challenge I really think is going to be on the overall inflation, and like the whole pricing mix has been a problem in the wine world for so long. And a lot of wineries are trying to think, okay, well, I'm going to have to raise my price. And they don't really know how, and they they don't know how to value their product, and their costs are going up. And I think we're going to see fairly quickly, wine being a luxury product, we're going to see some prices starting to go up, despite an overall global oversupply.
So what about from a tech perspective? There was an article, or there was news that maybe Russia would just shut off the internet from Russia from the rest of the world, which sounds insane. But in some ways, China has a firewall, and there seems to be, 2 or maybe 3 worlds developing. Jonathan, you've had experience trying to make Bottlebooks work in China. How, what is that like?
There's entire businesses set up around getting your content into China, and some of them have made it really easy for companies to get their content into China. I think I think over time there will be ways that are found to get around it. I mean, you also have the Tor and everything like that to get through, but not everybody. People still have to learn that technology, which they haven't had to do in Russia, maybe to the same extent as in other countries. But it's definitely a challenge, because you have the two levels. One is that they filter out anything from Google, period. And then if they tie your website to a business of a type that they disapprove of, then they'll block the content as well. And so that the filters are can be quite sophisticated, but then they hit at certain times unevenly. And so it's really about whack-a-mole to keep the connections up. But you also even start seeing this in Europe, compared to and some fragmentation compared to the US, where there have been so the old all around the GDPR topics. So the old common clauses are no longer valid. New policies had to be brought into place. And lip service to data management was no longer seen as sufficient. And so there's also a question of, is it legally permissible to use technology that comes from a US company? Forget the fact that it's hosted in Europe. Is it actually legally permissible to use a US company who might and so I don't think that's, you don't see a lot of people running for the hills. I think so. It's still fuzzy, but there is legislation that does make you question whether, sitting in Europe, you're able to use software that comes from outside of, or do software as a service that comes from outside of Europe.
And what is the cost of this? I mean, anybody can pick this up. I assume there's a financial cost to having divided internet, but there's got to be also a cost to how quickly everything will advance. I mean, it seems like this is really going backwards. Nick, you're nodding.
Yeah, I don't know what to add really. It does, it's quite worrying, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
it's insane that we're even considering it. I think, look, overall, cutting off the internet or Russia building its own firewall, ultimately, look, if they wanted to, fine. Same as China, right? If they want to control their internet and their people, fine. Overall, as businesses and as an economy, again, I think Russia imports a lot of goods. We do a lot of business with Russia genuinely, but in the scheme of things, it's fairly minute, right? You have a look at how much, I think Germany would be hit a whole much harder, right? Germany and Russia do have a pretty solid, I was reading about 30 billion a year worth of German exports into Russia. It's a decent chunk, right? When you look at the US, I think it was 8 or 9 billion a year. And if you look at the US-Canada relationship, last time I checked was about 300 or 400 billion. Right. So ultimately, there's only a handful of countries who really have a really tight relationship, a valuable relationship with Russia. And if you cut that off, look, it'll make life a bit harder. But I really think we're underestimating the other way around, how by cutting off, as I was saying earlier, some of the food, some of the wheat, some of the produce, and the oil. I mean, we're seeing right now the oil prices and the petrol prices going up. I think the impact is going to be felt by everyone on the planet far more. I mean, the Russians right now are more or less fucked, right?
Well,
it's unfortunate.
I think they probably took the view, to your point, that the West would not sanction them on those things that the West needed, but they obviously will, and we will go through some pain over the next couple of years. It's going to be a very bumpy ride, but I think what will also happen, it will put an absolute rocket under renewables, and I think that it's going to completely transform the landscape in a much shorter period of time than otherwise would have been the case, because the West is waking up to the danger of being dependent on unreliable countries.
Yeah, I've been reading even how some experts is just okay, so NATO and everything is not going to war. And again, that's not a subject of expertise, but when it comes to renewable and everything, they're what if we put a war effort towards it, right? Okay, we're not at war, but if we claim a war effort toward sustainable, there's a lot that can be done when there is what's the English saying, when there is a will there is a way, or something like that,
exactly. And look at a world in 5 years' time where Europe and significant parts of the world have shed or significantly reduced their reliance on oil and natural gas. Where does that leave Russia? They don't have the same leverage over their customers as they do today, and that is almost certainly going to be the journey. And as I say, I think it's going to be a tough couple of years or so. I think we're going to see inflation and potentially stagflation, possibly not, given the backdrop of growth that we had prior to that, which I guess wasn't the case in the 70s with the oil shock, right? But I think it will be quite tough for a couple of years.
Cana, who we talked about in a previous podcast, which is the digital printer for all drinks, is what they promise. They kind of claim that less than 1% of any drink that you drink, including wine, is essentially mostly, it's 99% water or maybe some alcohol, and the rest is flavor, color, taste, mouthfeel. And so they have now demoed this printer. And Seb, tell us what you thought of the demo.
I didn't actually see the demo. I listened to the demo as a podcast. So I don't know if the machine looks good, but from what it does. There you go. That's all.
Laurie, maybe I should go to you. Laurie,
as long as the machine
Laurie,
looks good on my countertop.
It's like, I mean, yeah, from a design standpoint, it's very Apple looking, like smooth edges, like brushed aluminum, really good lighting. Like I think they spend a lot of time like making sure so where it pours the liquid, it also has very nice light. So like as your liquid is being made, like it just looks very pretty. like, like it's just kind of, and it's especially more interesting because, like they were demonstrating like a blueberry drink. So it's got this purple hue color that was just like shining through. And then, but it's very Nespresso, but with less nubs. Like what was impressive is like a box with a cutout corner and round edges, and then just a touch screen, right? Like there's no knob, no nothing to apparently to kind of clean, no nozzle. Like it's just, yeah. But back to you, Seb. This was my description. And by the way, it is light gray.
I'm pretty sure anyone launching consumer products today wants to be Apple inspired, right? Or Nespresso inspired, right? We just know that the product has to be pretty schmick overall. Look, it's interesting overall to see. We knew it was going to work, right? We knew that they would be able the chemical deconstruction that they'd explained before does make sense, right? Ultimately, just to if anyone has missed the previous episodes, ultimately most of the beverages being sold around the world are 99% water. So transportation cost, warehousing cost, it's literally all space to house and transport water. And we all have a tap at home with a fairly reasonable quality of water, right? Which can be further filtered. So might as well try and just have a machine hooking up to the tap and just adding different molecular compound to make the water taste like any drink. So the premise makes plenty sense. What I thought was interesting is that so in terms of wine, for those who are interested in wine, they are basically saying that they're currently able to reproduce a wine of about, I think it was 1992 points.
Yeah.
So they can reproduce something that would be fairly similar to wine. It's not great wines, right? But it is wine that you can have pretty much on demand at home. And there is, from the limitation perspective, they were suggesting the mouthfeel, right?
Yeah.
The thickness in the liquid. That's something that they're still working on, right? So that's going to be a bit of a question mark, really. And there's also, I was surprised to hear about their business model and the way they were going to price it, right? So as a consumer, you have to buy the machine, and then for every drink that you make, you have to pay for the drink individually, right, at the end of the month on a subscription base, kind of on your credit card. But they're aiming for about 25% off retail, right? Which I thought was really interesting because it's not going to, it's a saving, but it's not a significant saving. On top of the fact that I have a few $100, maybe $1,000 to put on the machine first and foremost. I thought overall that's probably going to be, I mean, at least for the time being, it might be the saving grace of a lot of beverage producers. Because the consumer might turn around and say, well, it's not the same. It doesn't look, it's average wine, it's average cola, it's average drinks. and for a little bit more, I can get the real thing that's actually really enjoyable. So yeah, look, it's an interesting. I'll be curious to see how it all develops. I think we were discussing it before. I do think if you look at the Nespresso timeline, if you look at the Cana timeline, if you look at the overall reaching of consumers at a scale, look, I do think it's a 5 years, potentially up to 10 years before it scales beyond the US and to every household around the world.
Well, even just simply the size of it puts it off the market for the majority of the world, because that's it's an interesting little device, but do you really want to sacrifice that much counter real estate to it? So they need to get it down to an espresso size machine. But your point about the 25% off, I think it's probably I think part of the original pitch wasn't it to be able to supply recipes from lots of different vendors.
Yeah.
And so if you're just going to offer a markdown, but you first have to pay a couple grand or get a subscription or whatever to the service, you could see that they could probably persuade some vendors to go with them.
I think it's a strategy. They're trying to get Coke. They're trying to get everyone to just put their recipes on there, put their stuff on there to build a market. The challenge or the opportunity, really, let's look at the other way around. The opportunity is that a winemaker would ultimately be able to just create a drink out of thin air, right? Or just have their wines analyzed and have that wine to be, quote, printed anywhere on the planet. At a reduced price. But when you look at margins in distribution, especially around wine, a lot of the margins are absorbed in the supply chain, right? The producer, a $20 bottle sold in the SAQ in Quebec, the producer sees about $3.95 fullbacks, right? So if the producer can sell more or less direct, I'd be curious to see what it's going to do with alcohol. Because the government's like the SAQ is not going to allow Cana to just print wine in Quebec.
Yeah, for sure.
Excuse my French. No fucking way.
No, for sure. That's the interesting part. Like, how do the 3-tier system work? One thing is about Cana that is worth pointing out is the level of customization from the user perspective as well. Right? Like, you should just be like, oh, like I want this wine, but I want a lower percentage of alcohol. And like this, so there's also that level that right now is not available in, like in the general market. I don't know how many people would actually customize. And customization, like everything, like you like it as a concept, but then it's a lot of work to make it up each time. But like there's this appeal, right? Like this is my Seb wine, but with my twist on it or something like that. So that's totally like a Laurie wine.
It's like microwaves, right? They all compete on all the features, and you end up using like 2 or 3 of the 300 features that you bought with your microwave.
Totally the same.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so like Seb, I was most interested in the pay-per-drink model. I thought that was, interesting. It fits beautifully with the on-demand economy, if you like. Of course, you have to cover your capital costs and the costs of making a machine in the first place. And of course, if you don't get people to pay something for a machine up front, then how are you going to guarantee that they're actually going to be motivated to make enough drinks for your pay-on-demand model to stack up? So I think those two things are interesting. They obviously think that they're going to maybe cover their costs or make a little bit of money up front. They're going to make most of their money and presumably an enormous margin potentially on pay-on-demand, and they're going to make money from producers whose where their brands where they're prepared to put their brands in the machine or on the machine or whatever the right way of describing it is, and so they'll make money as well out of the printing on demand, because I guess that there'll be some sort of revenue share there. So I think it's an interesting business model. Like Laurie, I have no idea if it will work or not, but certainly it ticks all the boxes in terms of how do you build a business that you can spin off for $100 million in a few years' time or whatever, or a billion, should I say? But beyond that, I'm not particularly interested in the product as a device for making wine. I think we've talked about that before. If I had deals with sommeliers, as I think we mentioned in the previous call, and we were remanufacturing wine in our basements, then that might be different, but that's not really a market. And so from that perspective, I'm not really interested. I'm not really interested in the idea of additive alcohol. I'm interested in the idea of a natural product where alcohol is the byproduct of a fermentation process. Call me old-fashioned, right?
Yes, yeah, old school.
And look, it's also wine is a fairly traditional industry, and I mean we cannot ignore the large component of consumers who buy the $2.99 $2 chuck at Trader Joe. Right, there's a lot of wine being consumed that's a sub $10 bottle kind of a wine, and that market, look, it's a big chunk. I'm not sure what's the overall ratio. It's a big chunk. That market will be served relatively well. So if I was Constellation, if I was Gallo, I would probably kind of go, yeah, okay,
wait, is it really?
But it is a price sensitive market.
Yeah, but it's a price sensitive market. So why are they going to go out and pay $1,000 to make $3 chuck at home?
No, but the idea is that the launch price is about a couple $100, sub $1,000, and they were basically saying it's probably going to be cheaper as technology gets better. And look, I'm kind of looking at the number of the convenience of Nespresso. Nespresso is expensive, right? $1 per capsule, give or take, depending where you are.
Guess what? There's a product inside the capsule called coffee.
Oh no! I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, sorry. When you say there is a product, I would argue there is a tiny, minute fraction of a product. It's still being manipulated in some way, shape, or form. And if you look at the crema being produced out of an espresso machine, it's nothing to do with a proper crema coming out of.
But nevertheless, to your earlier point, it creates.
But the argument is
mouthfeel.
Consumers, even though it's expensive, consumers are also still going for it, and that's the convenience aspect of it. You don't need to stock up on anything. You don't need to clean up anything. You don't need to return the bottles because there's a deposit on the bottle. There's nothing. And that's where I think there's a large amount of the consumers, if they can get, to your point, Jonathan, if they can get the business model where they could lease it, right? Or they could have the machine to be on a afterpay kind of a model, right? Where, hey, you get all the drinks you want in your home and you're going to save 25% of all your drinks.
Yeah.
And bundled with I call it the Western North American consumerism. Everyone's going to want one of those machines. It's going to be the cool thing. They're going to leave it there and maybe never use it. So yeah, if I was a Gallo or Constellation,
if I may just say this, I think Nespresso identified a problem in the market, which was that there was a lot of coffee being made at home, and it was either not of particularly good quality, or it was hard to get the consistency in that product. Yeah. In this case, I'm not sure that there is a parallel. I'm not sure that there is a problem. I think that there is a product that needs there to be a problem. And therefore, the problem is articulated in a certain way. But I'm with Jonathan. I think Jonathan's point of view is, well, if I'm going to be buying a $10 bottle of wine and I've got 4 people coming around for dinner, I'm going to buy 2 bottles of wine and they're going to drink 2 glasses each. And the alternative is that I pay $2.99 to print a glass of something that's approximate to what it is that bought in a bottle, however straightforward that product may be, but it's probably okay actually. I don't know. I don't see a whole bunch of consumers going around and going, I don't like the fact that I'm buying bottles. I don't like the fact that brands are selling me products that have gone halfway around the world. I'm not sure people care that much.
Well, I think the one thing that I would taper my criticism on that is that we are obviously in this circle all very focused on wine. But there are a lot of soft drinks out there, and that might be a more likely target because probably the price per glass. I mean, you can see what you're paying at the gas station for a price a glass of, or for a Coke or something there. So it might be that it, like printing wine is the gimmick function. It's like saying, it's like a microwave saying that it's got a special pizza function. Anybody who's
You're very knowledgeable on microwave and pizzas.
The specialized pizza button on a microwave and said that they really enjoyed that pizza, that's okay. You haven't, when was the last time you had real pizza? But the rest of what it does, like warming up your coffee that you made with your Nespresso machine, but you drink so slowly that it got cold. But sure, the microwave does great to warm up that coffee 2 or 3 times so that you can get it empty. But I don't know. I think it's from a wine perspective. I think, I'm going to be skeptical. I'm going to put myself in the very skeptical column there. Yeah. But for somebody to print a Coke at home or print a 7-Up or something that was already 100% artificial, or a cocktail, maybe that's something that you could see people, or exactly a cocktail. I mean, there's a website a year ago, it was like bartender. Was a bar. Anyway, you put in all the ingredients in the kitchen, and then it would tell you what you could make with all the ingredients. What drinks where you could make where you're missing 1 ingredient, missing 2 ingredients, missing 3 ingredients, and this way you're never missing any ingredient to make that cocktail. And
look, I think just to go back onto the problem argument, you're correct, Nick, that Nespresso was really addressing a specific problem in the market. I think all of us on here are fairly knowledgeable when it comes to wine, right? We're quite enjoying some pretty decent quality wines, and we've had wines from all around the globe thanks to our business background. We're potentially underestimating the problem of an average consumer walking into a bottle shop and going, every time I'm being told buy this and I don't like it. and that kind of a consumer who has a friend or who hears of a YouTuber who's released a new recipe, or any $2 kind of a wine that I can just press a button and it's there. And if I need 1 bottle, I have 1 bottle. If I need 25 guests to have, again, the cheaper wines are far more threatened than the high level kind of wines, because the average consumer buying the cheaper wines really doesn't know or doesn't care or doesn't really comprehend the breadth, the traditions, the complexity of wine, right? Without wanting to sound like an absolute fucking snob. So that's a problem that might be addressed. So the bottle shops might increasingly start carrying better quality products, I would assume,
Well, that was episode 26 of the Wine Tech Insiders podcast. I'd like to thank all of our insiders, Seb from Troly, Laurie from Oushinery, Nick from Wine Owners, and Jonathan from Bottlebooks. We'll see you all in a few weeks.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Stay safe. Stay out of you.